Hi, my name's Eric. I'm 38 years old. I work in IT, and I used to believe that my wife and I were a team, partners through thick and thin, the kind of couple that could weather anything. We've been married for 10 years, and like most couples, we've had our ups and downs, job losses, family deaths, a miscarriage, moving twice. But through it all, I believed in us. I thought we were building a life together. It started with a phone call from my bank, a fraud alert, they said. Someone had tried to open a new credit card in my name. I assured them it must be a mistake. I hadn't applied for any new cards. They canceled it, no harm done. But that was the crack that started everything. A week later, I got another alert. This time, it was for a loan. Then another for a store card. My credit score started dropping. I checked my credit report and saw 5 new accounts I'd never opened. My stomach dropped. I thought maybe my identity had been stolen. I filed reports, froze my credit, called the police. That night, I told my wife, Jenna, what was going on. Her reaction was strange. Too calm. She said, "You work in IT? Maybe someone's targeting you." I nodded. It made sense. I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. So I dug deeper. I called the companies behind the accounts. One of them sent me copies of the applications, my name, our address, my social security number. But the email was Jenna's. The phone number was hers. Even her handwriting, I felt sick. I didn't confront her right away. I waited. I kept gathering information. Over the next 2 weeks, I discovered that she had taken out over $45,000 in loans and credit cards in my name. She'd been doing it slowly over the past year. She paid the minimum balances to keep me from noticing. It was all in my name. My debt. My ruined credit. I finally confronted her one night after dinner. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Well, maybe if you paid more attention to what's going on around you, this wouldn't have happened." Like it was my fault. I lost it. I yelled. I cried. I asked her why. She said she needed the money for emergencies. But when I asked what those were, she talked about designer clothes, spa treatments, and some investments she didn't want to explain. I couldn't believe this was the woman I married, the woman I trusted with my life, with our life. But it got worse. She wasn't just using the money on luxuries. She was using it to fund an entirely different lifestyle, one I wasn't a part of. I went through our shared bank account, and then I looked through Jenna's personal account. She'd always insisted on having her own emergency stash, and I never questioned it. But once I saw the transfers, thousands of dollars moving from credit cards and loans in my name into her account, I realized what she'd been doing. She was borrowing under my name and funneling it to herself. I found a second phone, hidden in her closet, wrapped inside an old scarf box. It was cheap, prepaid, and filled with messages I wasn't supposed to see. Some were to a guy named Kyle, others to a woman named T. They were bragging about how easy it was to manipulate me. Kyle called me a walking paycheck. T told her to bleed him dry before he wises up. And Jenna replied with laughing emojis. I felt like someone had set my chest on fire. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't desperation. It was planned, calculated. She knew exactly what she was doing. Still, I didn't leave. Not immediately. Call me weak. Call me naive. But I needed to understand why. Why would she do this to me? We shared a home, a bed, a life. We talked about having kids someday. How do you do that to someone you say you love? So I gave her one last chance to explain. I sat her down and told her I knew everything. The fake accounts, the second phone, the messages. I didn't even yell. I just asked, why? She shrugged. Then she said, "You're boring, Eric. I needed excitement. You're predictable. You wouldn't even notice if the house was on fire as long as you had your work laptop. I didn't think you'd ever figure it out." I asked her about Kyle. She smirked and said, "Just a friend. Don't be so insecure." I showed her the messages. Her face didn't even twitch. She just said, "So, are you going to cry now? Want me to feel bad for you?" That was the moment I knew I couldn't save us. There was no us to save. It had all been an illusion. 10 years of marriage, and I didn't know the person sitting in front of me. I went to sleep that night in the guest room. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about every lie she'd ever told me. Every time she'd laughed at my jokes, every time she held my hand, every "I love you" that now felt like a knife. The next morning, I called a lawyer, but even that wouldn't be simple, because all the debt was in my name. And legally, unless I could prove identity theft or get her to confess in writing, I was on the hook. And Jenna, she wasn't about to help. In fact, she lawyered up first. She told her family I was abusive, that I was trying to control her finances, isolate her, manipulate her. She painted herself as the victim. Her mother sent me a long text calling me a monster. Her brother told me to watch my back. All while Jenna sat in our house, spending the money she stole, wearing clothes she bought with my name, and telling the world that I was the problem. I moved out 2 days later, not because I wanted to, because I had to. The lawyer said that if she accused me of anything while I was still in the house, it could complicate things legally. I packed 2 suitcases, took my dog, and left the life I built behind. And just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, I learned something that made everything even worse. A week after I moved out, I got a call from my HR department. I thought maybe it was about the health insurance change. I'd already updated my address, separated accounts, but no. They said they'd received a formal inquiry from a debt collection agency regarding garnishment of my wages. I froze. My mind started racing. Garnishment? For what? I'd already frozen my credit. I thought I was handling it, but I hadn't realized how fast these things can move when the accounts are in default, and I hadn't even seen some of the bills she'd racked up. The debt was over $17,000 just from one card, and that was only the beginning. 3 different agencies started contacting my employer. I was humiliated. I felt exposed. It wasn't just my personal life falling apart anymore. It was bleeding into my professional world. That's when I made the hardest decision of all. I filed a police report against Jenna, not just for the identity theft, but for the fraud. I handed over all the evidence, the loan documents, the email trails, the phone numbers, the screenshots of her messages. It felt disgusting to do that to someone I used to love, but I had no other choice. I couldn't carry this burden alone, especially not while she was still living in our house, posting smiling selfies online like nothing had happened. A detective followed up a week later. He was professional, but blunt. "You've got a solid case, but be ready. These things take time, and sometimes the ones closest to us, they're the hardest to convict." While the investigation started, I stayed with my sister and her husband. I hated burdening them, but they were the only people who believed me. My own parents didn't know what to think. My dad told me to man up and fix my marriage. My mom said she must have had her reasons. That crushed me more than Jenna's betrayal. I began to isolate. I stopped answering texts. I avoided coworkers outside of work. I dreaded seeing Jenna's name pop up on anything. She still hadn't filed for divorce. She still hadn't admitted to anything. And the debt? Still growing. Late fees, interest, legal notices. And then, one afternoon, my sister handed me an envelope, no return address. Inside was a note in Jenna's handwriting. It said, "You ruined everything. You could have just ignored it. Now you'll pay more than I ever did." There was a flash drive taped to the note. I almost threw it away. But curiosity got the better of me. I plugged it into an old laptop I didn't use anymore and opened the single video file inside. It was Jenna, talking to someone off camera, laughing. He still thinks I'm confused, that I'm sick or impulsive. God, he's so dumb. I planned this from the start, all of it. The cards, the loans. I even used his birthday as the pin to make it easier. Then she looked at the camera. "Hey, Eric, bet you're watching. Go ahead, take this to your lawyer. See if it helps." She winked. I sat in silence for a long time. Then I copied the file and sent it straight to my attorney and the detective. It was the smoking gun. Things moved faster after that. The detective called me within 48 hours. Charges were being considered. Jenna would be brought in for questioning. They couldn't guarantee an arrest yet, but the tone had shifted. They took it seriously now. But nothing in this story comes easy, because just as I felt like I might be getting justice, Jenna flipped the script. She claimed I'd forced her to do it, that I emotionally abused her into financial dependence, that I pressured her into using my name because I controlled all the money. She filed a counterclaim, accused me of spousal financial abuse, And suddenly, I wasn't just fighting for my name. I was fighting not to become the villain in my own story. My lawyer said this was her last card, a desperate move. But even desperation can damage reputations. I had to prove I wasn't the man she was painting me to be. And I had to do it fast, before my life fell apart even further, and it almost did. My lawyer worked overtime. He started compiling every document, every bank statement, every message that showed I'd never restricted Jenna's access to money. Quite the opposite. I'd been paying most of the bills for years. Her spending wasn't just visible to me. It was often encouraged when I thought it was something we needed. But even facts can be twisted. Jenna's attorney submitted photos of her crying, journal entries I didn't know she kept, and screenshots cropped to remove context. She was spinning a story, and I had to untangle it piece by piece. The court ordered financial mediation. It was brutal. Sitting across from her after everything while she acted like I'd traumatized her made my blood boil. I wasn't allowed to react. I had to be calm, rational, and cooperative, or else risk playing into her narrative. During one session, she said, "I only did what I had to do to survive." Eric made me feel like a prisoner. The mediator looked at me. I said nothing. Later that evening, I broke down in my car, not just because of the lies, but because part of me still wanted to believe she could be helped. That maybe this was some mental spiral. But it wasn't. It was control. It was manipulation. And I had to stop mourning the version of her that never really existed. Meanwhile, the detectives moved forward. The video she sent me, intended to mock, was now evidence. Her handwriting on the fraudulent documents, her voice on voicemails, her digital trail. They issued a warrant to search her devices, and that's when the final puzzle pieces fell into place. They found more accounts, ones I hadn't seen, even accounts in other people's names, family members, friends. She'd been running a mini empire of financial fraud, taking out credit, maxing it out, letting it rot. Some of it traced back nearly 5 years. I sat in the courtroom the day they charged her. 3 counts of identity theft, 2 of fraud, 1 of wire fraud. She wore a blazer like she was going to brunch. Didn't look at me once, but her lawyer did. Right before the hearing, he offered me a deal. If I dropped the charges, Jenna would agree to full divorce terms. House in my name, release of spousal support, and no claim to my pension. It was tempting. I was exhausted. Part of me just wanted it over. But then I remembered that letter. That smirk on the video, that look in her eyes when she said I was boring. I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about drawing a line. So I said no. The trial wasn't quick. It dragged on for months, but during that time, something unexpected happened. People started reaching out to me, friends I thought I'd lost, co-workers who'd heard rumors but never knew the truth. Even Jenna's cousin, who told me she'd borrowed money from half the family and vanished. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't the villain in a one-sided story. Still, it hurt. Every day I woke up with anxiety. I couldn't trust my inbox, my voicemail, my bank account. I lived in fear that another shoe would drop, that I'd find out she took out a mortgage, a car loan, something else I hadn't caught. Therapy helped. Slowly, I started going twice a week. I journaled, I meditated. I tried to piece myself back together because that's what this kind of betrayal does. It doesn't just break your finances. It breaks your sense of self. You question your judgment, your reality, your worth. You wonder if you'll ever be able to love or trust again? But something else happened too. I started rebuilding. I got a second job freelancing on the side to pay down the debt faster. I took classes in financial literacy even though I'd already been good with money. I just wanted to feel in control again. And slowly, my credit began to heal. Jenna tried one more trick. Right before the trial started, she posted a long thread on social media, calling herself a survivor, accusing me of everything from financial abuse to emotional neglect. It went viral for a day. And then her ex-friends started replying with screenshots, stories, receipts. The thread collapsed under the weight of her own lies. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. But I also felt something close to peace, because the trial was coming. And with it, the end of this nightmare. At least I hope so. The courtroom was cold, sterile, like it had been designed to suck emotion from the air, but my hands still trembled the day I walked in to testify. It had been a year since I discovered the first fraudulent account. A year of lawyers, documents, therapy, lost friendships, and rebuilding my sense of safety from the ground up. Jenna sat across the room, scribbling in a notebook, whispering with her lawyer, never once looking at me. When they called me to the stand, I felt strangely calm, numb almost. I told the court what happened, how I found out, what I did. I presented the documents, the emails, the video she sent me herself. Jenna's lawyer tried to spin it, said I was controlling, that I micromanaged our finances, that she had no choice but to hide money. They even suggested I planted the second phone. But facts are stubborn things, and so are digital fingerprints. When the prosecution played her video in full, her laughing, her bragging, her taunting, I watched the jury's faces shift. Some looked stunned, others angry. Her smirk faded after that. Then came the witnesses. One by one, people I hadn't even expected stepped up. Her cousin, an old college friend, even a former coworker. Each of them had their own version of the same story. Jenna borrowing money, telling lies, ghosting them. One woman said, "She told me Eric was abusive, but then I saw pictures of them on vacation, holding hands." She lied, and when I asked questions, she blocked me. Piece by piece, the narrative fell apart. The jury deliberated for 2 days. I couldn't sleep during that time. Every hour felt like a century. I kept thinking, what if it wasn't enough? What if she got away with it? But on the third day, the verdict came in. Guilty, all charges, identity theft, fraud, wire fraud, and more. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison with restitution required. The judge was stern but fair, saying, "This wasn't a crime of desperation, it was a crime of entitlement, of cruelty, of betrayal." I sat there, stone still. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. It was over, or at least I thought it was, because even with the sentence, the damage was done. The debt still existed. The banks weren't eager to erase it, even with the conviction. Some would cooperate, others would fight. My lawyer said the process of clearing my name financially could take years. But the emotional part, that was harder. There were nights I still dreamed about her, not nightmares, just memories, good ones. A picnic in the park, her hand on mine during a storm, her laugh when we watched dumb sitcoms together, and in those dreams I'd forget what she did. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, confused, wondering if I had made the whole thing up. Trauma does that. It doesn't just scar you, it gaslights you from within. I went back to work full time. Slowly, I kept my head down. I stopped dating, stopped socializing. I wasn't ready. Trust didn't come easy anymore. One day, my boss pulled me into a meeting. I thought I was in trouble. Instead, he said, "I read everything. I know what you went through. If you ever want to transfer or change projects, I'll support you." I nodded, stunned. Gratitude doesn't even cover what I felt, because for the first time in over a year, someone saw me. Not the drama, not the headlines, just me. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. Jenna didn't contest the terms. She couldn't. Her assets were seized. Her name, once polished and curated, had become toxic even to her own family. I kept the house, the dog, my peace. And as I stood in the empty kitchen one morning, coffee in hand, sun pouring through the window, I realized something else. I was still standing. She tried to break me, but I was still here. And I wasn't done yet, because there was still one thing left to do. Tell my story. Not for revenge, not for sympathy, but for anyone out there who might be going through something similar, who's being gaslighted, lied to, manipulated, blamed for things they didn't do. You are not crazy. You are not alone. And you can survive this. I did, but there's one more thing I need to share. One final twist I didn't see coming. The final twist came 6 months after the trial ended. I had just started to feel stable again. I'd begun dating. Not seriously, just dipping a toe back into the idea of connection. My debt was slowly shrinking thanks to a settlement with one of the credit card companies, and my dog Milo was healthier than ever. I had found a rhythm. My therapist called it post-traumatic clarity. The moment when your brain finally stops screaming and you hear yourself again. Then, one afternoon, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten envelope, no return address. Inside was a photo, Jenna, in a cafe. Sitting across from someone I hadn't seen in over 15 years, my younger brother, Jason. Jason and I hadn't spoken in years. We'd had a massive falling out after he tried to borrow money from me repeatedly, then blamed me when I said no. He disappeared from the family, only showing up occasionally in vague Facebook posts or through third-hand gossip. Seeing the two of them together hit me like a truck. I didn't know what the photo meant. Was it old? Staged? A prank? Until I got the next envelope a week later. This time it wasn't just a photo, it was a letter from Jason. He said he and Jenna had reconnected accidentally through a mutual friend, that she explained everything, why that I was controlling, that I'd isolated her, that I had forced her hand financially. Jason said he believed her. He said he now understood why I cut him off, and he forgave me for being the kind of brother who could drive someone to commit fraud. My hands shook with rage. I didn't know what made me angrier, the betrayal or the smug tone he used, like he'd solved some deep family mystery. But what really tore through me was this. Jenna was still at it, still spinning narratives, still manipulating. Even from prison she was trying to smear me, to turn people against me, to rewrite the truth. And Jason? He bought it. I took the letter to my lawyer. He advised me to ignore it unless it escalated, but it weighed on me. Not because I feared Jenna or Jason, but because I realized something fundamental. There will always be people who believe the lie, no matter how much evidence you have, no matter how clear the truth is. Some people need the story that fits their pain better than reality does. For Jason, that story was easier than admitting he'd been selfish. For Jenna, it was easier than owning her crimes. I almost let that destroy me. But instead, I used it. I finished my story, I spoke publicly, shared my experience on a podcast. I talked about financial abuse, manipulation, and surviving betrayal, not for revenge, but for release. I started getting messages from people, men and women, who had been through similar situations. People who thought they were alone, who thought no one would believe them because the damage wasn't visible, because the scars were inside bank accounts, credit scores, and mental health diagnoses. And I told them, "You're not crazy. You're not broken. You were targeted by someone who knew exactly how to twist the world around you." That message, repeated over and over, started to heal me in ways I didn't expect. Now, almost 2 years later, my credit is nearly restored. My house is quiet, peaceful. I have a partner now, someone who knows my story and doesn't flinch. Someone who asks, not assumes, who listens. Jenna is out on parole. I don't care where she is. I've blocked every avenue she could use to reach me. Jason? I haven't heard from him since that last letter. Maybe someday I'll reach out. Maybe not. Some doors are better left closed, but if you've listened to this whole story, here's what I want you to take away. Betrayal doesn't define you. Pain doesn't make you weak, and even the deepest scars can fade if you stop picking at them and start building something better. I'm Eric. I'm 40 now, and I survived a marriage that almost erased me. But I'm still here, and I finally know who I am again.